After more than 2 decades abroad, he is back in Africa, committed to reverse the continent's so-called brain drain.
You can rule the world this much in the West, but you can rule the world this much by coming to Africa, because it's a well-defined problem and there's tremendous potential.
A leading scientist in one of the most prestigious research companies in the world. He is passionate about cutting-edge technology and innovative African solutions for African problems.
I've got to understand that majority of my people live under less than $2 a day. Majority of my people only speak one language, in some cases it's an indigenous language. It's that whole holistic view that allows technological innovation to be relevant to the community.
This week on African Voices, we talk to the chief scientist at Africa's first commercial technology research facility, Nigerian-born Oyi Stewart. In front of the giant-sized computer screen, Oyi Stewart is at ease as he showcases one of IBM Research Africa's latest innovations. The Global Lab is a sharp contrast from his years at University of Benin in Nigeria.
At the time I left, I had no familiarity with a PC, right? And so, but you see these things on TV, right? And there is this fascination and enduring passion to try to innovate on that device, but you don't have access to it.
When you started telling people that you wanted to become a computer scientist 2 decades ago, that wasn't really something that people had much of a concept of here.
That's right.
I'm just trying to imagine the reaction.
It was so theoretical. I have to admit, I had no clue. I wish I could tell you that I had it all worked out.
So what made you think computer science?
I took a course, and back 2 decades ago, there was COBOL and there was Fortran. And there was a movement within mathematics to begin to compare mathematical algorithms with natural language. That's really what stimulated my fancy and interest in computer science. And so I started to look at, can we develop algorithms that can help us to interpret and understand natural language? That's how I got to where I am today. So my background really is in the area of speech recognition.
After graduating with honors, he wanted to pursue computer science studies, but there was no infrastructure in his home country where he could further those studies. And so, like many other brilliant young Nigerians then, he decided to look west.
And you chose to go and do your research abroad. Why? Why did you want to do your further studies abroad?
About 2 decades ago, part of the fad and the attraction was to try to conquer overseas. And what I mean is there were a bunch of us who were nerds, and we were no longer satisfied with just being brilliant at home. And there were also issues around extending scholarship to minorities in the country. And so a lot of us usually just look out. And so I always clarify, back then it was not an economic refugee, but intellectual escape to try to do something bigger than what the country could offer.
Stewart applied for a graduate scholarship at the University of Cambridge in England.
I had applied to the Commonwealth Scholarship, which is a way for most Nigerians competitively to go abroad, right? And somehow, you know, it didn't happen. But Cambridge University had this very competitive merit-based system, right? And they test you in verbal and quantitative aptitude. Come show what you got. And so I said I was going to do it, right? I just, you know, maybe I was naive. Maybe it's just a profound belief in the human essence. And I said, I'm going to do it. And did it. And I was given a scholarship and a plane ticket and a bus ride to go to Cambridge. So that's the background that explains what I call a profound phenomenal sense of just, wow.
And then from Cambridge, the journey to the States?
And then I took off to the New World. That's what we used to call it.
You were off.
So there is this age-old problem in natural language processing. You know, so earlier on I talked about that I'm a speech recognition person. That's my background. In computer science, we've always tried to solve this problem we call deixis, which is the localization of space and time. Let me give you an example. When I say, I am here, right? You understand the lexical content of I am, but here can only be interpreted by knowing the localization of the speaker, because here can be Nairobi or it can be Lagos. So the reference of here is what we call a deictic reference. Computers are really lousy at that, right? And so there was an article that came out around when I finished my Master of Philosophy in one of the prominent journals in my field. And the guy put a stake on the ground in terms of a theoretical analysis of this a problem. And I wrote to him, and I said, "You're wrong." the shameless effrontery of this kid. But I wrote to him and I said, "You're wrong, because what you've just analyzed does not apply to African languages, to Chinese, to Japanese, to Italian." And
so
said,
you were broadening the horizon.
That's right. I said, he said, "Come on, I'll give you money. Come and, put your money where your mouth is." And that's how I got to the New World.
So he paid for you to
That's
go to the
right.
States.
That's right. Because I was foolish enough to challenge him. And he's one of the world authorities in the space.
And did you win? Were you right?
Here is the end of the story. We've co-authored many papers together, and the dissertation that worked on this problem has been published as an outstanding dissertation in my field.
What was his name?
Mark Baker. He's a professor at Rutgers University in New Jersey.
So it went on to become this collaboration for you.
That's right, collaboration and great friend, because we worked on this problem together and we've received...
because he thought you were a cheeky kid.
He thought I was bold and foolish.
During Nigeria's civil war in 1967, Stuart, who was just a child at the time, watched his father provide shelter and protection to people outside of his tribe. Stuart says the experience taught him to be blind to race and ethnicity.
What was it like as an African grad student 2 decades ago at Cambridge University?
First, it was...
Studying computer science?
Yes, it was phenomenal.
I can't imagine there were many Africans in that room.
No, there weren't many. So a lot of Africans were in accounting, economics, in law, engineering, but not core computer science. It was phenomenal, let me put it that way. In the department, I was the only black kid, but that's okay. I never really see color, and this is true, and I'm not trying to be patronizing here. It doesn't, at the end of the day, if you are an academic, those things don't matter. It's really, how can you hold your own? And that's been really what pushes me as an individual. So yes, I was the only black kid in class, but at the end of the day, it's what, can I make a difference? And still, that's why I'm here today. Folks ask me, and now I'm really long-winded, what's the difference between West Africa and East Africa? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Yes, there are differences, but hey, look, can you make a difference? That's what pushes me as an individual, back then in Cambridge and now.
And in his effort to make a difference, Stuart will return to his home continent in a role that will help him solve some of Africa's everyday problems.
When the opportunity presents itself that allows you to leverage innovations in science and technology to begin to make a profound impact in the lives of more than 1 billion people, I don't know what more can stop anybody. Let's do it.
His Excellency the President now will sign the visitor's book.
IBM Research has a history of breakthroughs in innovation.
Excellency, on this side, we begin to also have the response. We monitor what is the response that tracks this emergency when it arises.
The company has labs across the globe and last year opened its 12th research facility in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. It is the first commercial technology research facility in Africa, and Uyi Stewart was chosen to be its chief scientist.
So you were involved with IBM's decision to open its hub in Africa.
That's right. I co-led the strategy that led to the establishment of the lab, yes.
So you believed in this and you went back and you pushed it to IBM.
I don't know about pushing. It's the other way. IBM saw the potential in this continent. And what I did basically was just to come in and be that enabler to do the work. But the company's already seen great potential.
Let's talk about Africanized solutions. Yes. You've spoken about having Africanized solutions to Africa's problems.
Yes.
What to you is an Africanized solution?
It's about taking local content and making it relevant to the community based on your understanding of the strengths and weaknesses in that community. So one strength is lots of people. One obvious weakness is illiteracy, poverty. I can go on and on. So when you talk about an Africanized solution, it's a solution that says, yes, I have numbers, but as I build and design, oh, by the way, I've got to understand that majority of my people live under less than $2 a day. Majority of my people only speak one language. In some cases, it's an indigenous language. So I've got to think about those things. It's that whole holistic view that allows technological innovation to be relevant to the community.
So let's take Nairobi traffic. How would you apply that human-computer interface to solve that problem?
So Nairobi traffic is a nightmare to those who've only lived in Nairobi, right? So it's such a relative statement, right? Because if you move out of Nairobi and go to Lagos, it's a gridlock, and Lagosians will tell you it's a nightmare. Let us look at, so in order to answer this thing around, this question around human-computer interface or interaction, let us compare these two cities, and I will pose a few questions. What are the limitations here in Nairobi, right? There are a few. One, the road network is finite. How many options do we have when we have a traffic gridlock on junction? What are the options? So the road network is finite. So it's easy to try to build a system that can tell you when there's gridlock here, move X. But X is limited. So there's got to be another way. The other way is, can I gather data on my finite road infrastructure and optimize? Now that's flipping the question on its head. Therefore, it's no longer about routing, which is how do I get from point A to point B, right? It's about how do I intelligently navigate around the gridlock. That's how we're changing this discourse, right? And the way to do it, therefore, is this symbiotic relationship between the brilliance that comes from machines and the compute power that they offer, and the human ability. When you combine both, that's how we're going to bridge the chasm in terms of infrastructural deficit that we have in the continent.
Before taking up his position in Nairobi, Stuart worked and lived in the United States with his wife and 4 daughters. They have all now made Nairobi their home, and Stuart's hope is that brilliant and talented Africans living abroad will follow his example and come back to work on the continent.
And here at IBM, you are actively recruiting people from the African diaspora to come back home.
That's right. I am the part of the diaspora, and I am home. And I am saying, let's come back, right? There is just the wind of change is massive, right? Let's come back and make a difference. It's easy to talk about giving back, right? But when the opportunity presents itself, such as IBM Research Africa, that allows you to leverage innovations in science and technology to begin to make a profound impact in the lives of more than 1 billion people, I don't know what more can stop anybody. Let's do it.
Because a lot is talked about in terms of the brain drain and the impact that that's had.
That's right.
The capacity bleeding out to the West.
That's right.
When you go and recruit these guys, what do you say to them? How do you convince them?
It's more about the essence of what we're trying to do, right? At the end of the day, you don't want to bring someone into the continent and they are frustrated with science, with lack of infrastructure, right? So the problem space we've defined is really practical. It's there. And it has potential for scale in terms of impact. At the end of the day, every scientist is selfish and greedy. I want to rule the world. And what we are offering all of these research scientists out there is saying, you know what? You can rule the world this much in the West, but you can rule the world this much by coming to Africa, because it's a well-defined problem and there's tremendous potential for scale of impact when you innovate.
Next, Stuart has some advice for Africa's next wave of inventors.
All innovators in the continent of Africa should be problem-centric. What problem are you trying to solve? And ask yourself, right? So at the end, who's going to use it?
According to the African Development Bank Group, Africa is now the fastest growing continent in the world. Excited and passionate to leverage on this growth is Uyi Stewart, the chief scientist at IBM Research Lab in Africa.
What do you think it says about where the continent is today that IBM has chosen to hub one of its research facilities on the African continent?
First, it's a profound confirmation of the growth that you see in the continent of Africa. Right? That's the first thing. And then secondly, it just speaks, and I'm going to be self-serving here, but I truly love IBM, right? It just speaks to a company like IBM who looks far ahead. IBM has a history of looking 10, 20 years down the road and analyze and look at future trend. IBM believes in Africa and wants to be part and a catalyst to the growth that we see. And that's why we are here. I think that's what this research lab speaks to be part and a catalyst for the growth.
But of course it also speaks to the potential for profit.
Why not? I mean, look, at the end of the day, I've got to pay my bills.
So when you look at the innovations that are, I mean, Africa, here in Kenya, we have M-Pesa, the mobile money transfer system. A lot has been said about how mobile phones have allowed Africans to leapfrog a lot of the technological innovations that should have happened. You know, we've kind of moved several decades. What do you see coming over the horizon in terms of innovations?
I see Africa showing the rest of the world what kind of innovation you can derive from big data, whether it's from the mobile devices. We really don't think about the channel, right? That's an end game in this whole thing. It's really the hub, the backbone, right? Given the proliferation of mobile devices, given the possibility and potential of sensors, right? What can we do? And given the availability of lots of dark data, what do I mean by that? Do you know that as you go across the continent and go through government offices and people's homes, that we have tons of data that's just sitting there idle? Now,
what do you mean by idle? Not inputted into a computer
No,
system?
nothing. It's not digitized. It's just there, right? Take these three factors. Potentials of leveraging cool data from sensors. We already have massive proliferation of mobile devices, smartphones and basic phones. Now you have this available dark data put all together. You have this hub for big data. And then going back to this human-computer interaction I talked about, which is the cognitive computing. What kind of innovations do we see in Africa? Nothing can stop us from innovating in agriculture, right? From innovating in education, right? Just new ways of delivering education. Nothing can stop us from payment, financial inclusion. Nothing can stop us in healthcare. I can go on and on and on. It's an open gamut. But the base of this is big data. And that's going to drive massive innovation in this continent, more than what we've seen in M-Pesa.
And then you throw in an untapped consumer growth potential.
That's right. That's right. It's exponential.
So would you see tech companies as being almost the middleman? You have all these consumer companies that want to come in and they want to sell to Africans, and you would be helping them sell better.
I'm an enabler, right? That's what I do. I've got to play to my strength. And actually that's needed. Who's going to digitize the data? Who has the compute power to begin to crunch the data and glean intelligence and insights out of it? That's what I do. And when I do that, then I'm going to open up all of that to the community and let them leverage it. And the ecosystem just becomes vibrant.
Across Africa, there is a boom in tech hubs such as Banta Labs in Senegal and iHub in Kenya. Here, hundreds of young entrepreneurs create apps, but most of the apps aren't commercially viable.
Sustainability of innovation comes from commercial viability. If you innovate for fun, right, then we will be where we are today. And I think that's kind of the ecosystem we see right now. It's beginning to change, and we need it to change some more, which is, you know, I want to do X on the mobile phone. We run to the end solution immediately without a complete grasp of the problem. Why don't we stop focusing on being fixated on the mobile phone and go back to the base and say, what problem are we trying to solve? Because there may be alternatives. Right now, we all herald the mobile phone as the PC for Africa. Maybe there are other portable devices, but no one's really looking at it, right?
Because that's the available infrastructure.
But there could be others, because we can tap into edge technology to take advantage of other things, but we are not looking there. We can look there if we do what I'm prescribing, which is now all innovators in the continent of Africa should be problem-centric. What problem are you trying to solve? And ask yourself, right? So at the end, who's going to use it? If you ask those two questions, then we can begin to talk about sustainability.
That's a good point. But what would you want to see from governments in terms of legislation?
So ICT policy, which is kind of where innovation is classified across the continent, is evolving, right? And some countries are kind of more advanced than others, and others are just beginning to pick it up. So you have very aggressive, positive environment in Rwanda, for instance, where the government is throwing tons and tons of investment to stimulate innovation, which is great. And I just only want to call out that example. But as you go across the continent, the same doesn't hold for all the countries. So what you want, therefore, is this recognition that technology is an enabler. And it's a critical enabler to allow this continent to leapfrog in all of these areas where we face infrastructural challenges. With that recognition and giving the Rwanda example, I think that the governments can catch on and make a difference.
If there was one message that you wanted people to take away from hearing you out today, what would it be?
That Africa, as a continent, we've come a long way. And we've made tremendous strides. And we've had our ups and downs. But we're at a very, very, very critical point right now, what I call the tipping point. And we've got to do it right. Governments and private corporations and citizens got to see the value in this time that we are in and leverage the capabilities that we have, whether it's science, whether it's technology, or even people power, and work together and make this transformation that is on the way, this wind of change, make it happen. That's the one message, and that's the mission of IBM Research Africa.